connection, maintain his memory. He will maintain the sense as to who he truly is, what he stands for, what he represents. This becomes a source, and this represents so to speak, a neshama strength and a spiritual strength to be able to maintain a connection to the truth of what one of where one really belongs under all circumstances, even the circumstances of godless. Ephraim, on the other hand, is almost an opposite the form or focus. Ephraim, Yosef, the Pasuk says, Yosef said, he called Ephraim, Ki Hefrani Alekim Be'eretz Oni, that Hashem made me fruitful, has given me success, and made me accomplished Be'eretz Oni, in the land of my pain, pain.
Affliction?
Huh?
Affliction? What does that mean?
Yeah, affliction or pain. In other words, Ephraim represents a full involvement in the Golus situation, and being successful in an accomplishment in the Golus situation. These two aspects in a person's life in general reflect two concerns that a person would have. Concern, worries. Where do I come from, and where am I going to? Why am I here? Based on where I'm coming from. Because in fact, Golus, every Golus and every Golus in general, so to speak, on a national level, and the Golus of every individual person, the difficulties that every individual Yid faces, has to overcome, and has to deal with, these are all things that a Yid has a mission to accomplish. Nothing is there in vain, for absolutely no reason, just happened to be like this. And therefore, there are these two elements. He has to identify who am I, and what am I supposed to accomplish here? Where am I going? The Rebbe points out that, I'll bring out as much as I can from the Sikha, and then we'll discuss it here, that Yosef's name, Rochel gave Yosef the name Yosef, She said, Yosef Hashem li bein acher. That she's praying that Hashem should give her another son. Yosef, the word Yosef means to add. Hashem should add another son. There is a saying from the Frierdiker Rebbe that Yosef Hashem li bein acher implies that Hashem should make an acher. Acher means someone who is strange from Yiddishkeit, somebody who is forgotten and been lost to Yiddishkeit, that he should be added on, coming back. That was the whole union of bringing a Yid back to Yiddishkeit is a union from Yosef. Yosef Hashem li bein acher.
What was Rachel saying?
Rachel was saying that Hashem should add me another son. But there is, that she should have another son. But there is a deeper meaning in this word, bein acher. Acher means someone who is different, who is strange. Somebody who is away, does not know that he is my son, should also come back and recognize that he is my son. In other words, the whole union of bringing Eden back to Yiddishkeit. And this is the stage of Yosef being in Mitzrayim and having and maintaining, so to speak, maintaining and remembering his status as to who he is and keeping himself strong in Mitzrayim. And then also Hifrani, and also then transforming and having an effect in Mitzrayim itself, doing his what's called Avedas Habirurim in Mitzrayim. Yankiv and Yosef. These are the two. Yankiv was Yankiv was higher than the Shvatim, Yankiv was the father. And Yosef, his function was to bring out and to fully accomplish Yankiv's mission in the world. And thus, this is the Inyan. At Yankiv, he brought up a nation and taught brought up a nation that is dedicated to Avodas Hashem. But that is not enough. The Yosef brought this Inyan into Mitzrayim itself. This is the relationship and the connection between Yankiv and Yosef. And this is reflected in the Ephraim element. That Ephraim is Yosef's accomplishment in Mitzrayim, not just maintaining connection to Yankiv, but accomplishment in Mitzrayim. Okay, so much from the Sikha. I want to discuss mainly our Inyan. The Rebbe explains that what is really so significant and so important and so great about Eden being in Golus and coming out of Golus and maintaining and breaking through the Golus. What do we need the Golus for? The Rebbe says an interesting thing in a different Sikha. That when Yankiv wanted to tell his sons, this is in today's Pasha, right, about the redemption, about the coming of Mashiach, and he was not given the opportunity, he was not allowed to do that. So the Rebbe says, why not? In today's Pasha it says, and you wanted to tell Eden, to tell his sons when the redemption is going to be, right? Rashi says in Nistamun the permission was taken away from him. However this thing explains. Why not? Why was the permission taken away? So one of the explanations in this is that Golus Mitzrayim had to be a full-fledged Golus in order to accomplish what Golus is supposed to accomplish. If Eden already know a date when they're going to be redeemed, it's not a full-fledged Golus. A full-fledged Golus means, by definition, that you don't see the light at the end of the tunnel. You're completely into the Golus, and you're working inside the Golus. You don't give up, despite the fact that you don't see where this is going to lead and when this is going to end. This is the real Golus, and this is why Yankiv was not given the opportunity to tell his sons when the end of the Golus is going to be. So now the question is, what is so dear and so great and so important about Golus? That they should be insistent that the Golus should be a 100% Golus. So I'll use an analogy and then to explain the point. And then we'll go back to the Indian. We know that in a person, in a goof, in a human being, in a Yidden, there is the goof and there is the neshama. There's a nefesh olekis and the nefesh habamis. They all learned that. Nefesh olekis naturally wants a lakus. Nefesh habamis naturally can't relate to it, doesn't want it. And so too the goof. The goof appreciates and experiences only gashmiyus and does not appreciate and experience ruchnis. Yet, we have to understand a very profound principle. Despite the nature of nefesh habamis and the nature of the goof, everything was created by the same creator. Ultimately. And therefore everything really relates and can be made to appreciate and to want to relate to the same truth. Except the nefesh olekis is alive and well and has the sensitivity and naturally is drawn to this inyan. Nefesh habamis does not have this natural draw. Nefesh habamis is satisfied to be whatever it is. If it's in Gashmis, it's in Gashmis. What is the significance of saying that everything was created by the same creator? Okay, this is an important point. Again, I'm going to step back and give you a little bit of an analogy. We have the intellect and we have the emotion. Right? The intellect and the emotion. What is the primary difference between the intellect and the emotion? A human being in his emotions also wants to do the right thing. Not only his intellect, he wants to do the right thing. He wants to do good things and so forth. There's a primary difference between the way the intellect relates to things and the way the emotion relates to things. The intellect, you can explain things. You can investigate and make sense and argue the point until you come to a conclusion. In other words, the intellect is able to figure things out that are not so obvious, but by logic and by reason, it can figure out and relate to things that are not so obvious, that are distant. Like, for instance, to take a very simple, mundane illustration. A person has to force himself to go to work. Why? And on what basis, how does he force himself to go to work? He makes a very simple cheshbon. And the cheshbon is a simple argument. If I don't go to work, then I'm going to get fired. I'm going to get money. The body would rather not go. The nefesh habahamis would rather sleep. And there's no way to convince them, no, you should go. He doesn't want. But you have to force it. The intellect understands, no, you better go. So this is a very simple illustration of the fact that the intellect can relate to things that are not so obvious, that are not so, that he doesn't experience, but he knows that this is the right thing to do. Then you have to project from this to a whole lifetime path of life, that the intellect is able to detect and to understand right from wrong, even if it is not very pleasant, even if it is distant. This is the intellect. The emotion, on the other hand, the emotion, the heart, does not relate to things that it doesn't feel. It doesn't know the existence of things that it doesn't feel. The heart has to be touched directly. If I feel it, I feel it. If I don't feel it, it doesn't exist. So, this is essentially the nature of the nefesh habahamis, the behemoth in the person and the goof. It is not necessarily evil per se, but it doesn't have the capability of relating to things that it doesn't feel. It has to feel personally on its own body, so to speak, feel the experience and the value and the goodness of something. If it doesn't feel it, it cannot relate to it.
Marbacho, you said the intellect can relate to things. What do you say exactly?
Even if they are distant, even if he doesn't see them, he doesn't feel them, but he knows that they are right. The emotion cannot. Emotion has to be touched. So therefore, when you come to the intellect and you say, where does the world come from? What is the world about? Even though he's in Golus, and in a bitter Golus, and everything goes against him, but still he understands, yes, this is right. The truth is the truth. He understands it. And he can relate to it. And he can even maintain, so to speak, a connection and Nashani, even though I'm far away from my father, but I'll remember who my father is. And I still want to keep a connection. In other words, what I am, what I stand for. On the other hand, the involvement in Mitzrayim, the experience of Mitzrayim per se, the emotional part of the person, that is not capable of maintaining, of just from memory. There has to be something that's real. He has automatically gets involved in Mitzrayim, in the place where he is. But, despite the fact that he gets involved in the place where he is, this is the important thing I said. The truth of that presence and the truth of the Gashmizik world is still, it does not have a truth but for the fact that God created it. And therefore, ultimately, if it works, so to speak, in the circumstances, in the Golus, in the Mitzrayim, it will eventually recognize godliness in the Gashmizik world itself. And
How's this?
excuse me?
You said how? Like the experience of Mitzrayim, like it only recognizes godliness through Hifrani, you're saying?
Being within the Gashmius, within the world, you can only recognize godliness if you are involved and you actually feel it. And eventually, this is what actually occurred. This is what we call avodas habirurim. Avodas habirurim. Avodas habirurim means to work with the Gashmius and to transform the Gashmius, transform that which hides and conceals godliness and to reveal the godliness in it.
Which one's, what's the it? It's the God, it's the...
Within the Gashmius itself. Within the Gashmius itself. I'm sorry?
The Himoli knows what it is, that there's a God and something? Are you talking about the nefesh piece?
Ultimately, even the Nefesh HaBahabis will recognize Elokus, but in an entirely different way. I'll explain the whole thing. Later on, you will learn when we come to Kriyas Yamsuf. When Eden came out of Mitzrayim, they came to the Yamsuf. So when they were standing in front of the Yam, and they were standing in front of the Yam, and the Mitzrayim were chasing them. You know the story, right? So the Mitzrayim were chasing them. So on the one hand, they were the Mitzrayim chasing them, and on the other side, they were in front of the Yam. They were sandwiched there, right, between Mitzrayim and Mitzrayim. What am I going to do? How are we going to resolve this dilemma? So it says over there that Eden formed 4 different camps, 4 different ideas that people come up with. Some said, let's go back to Mitzrayim. Some said, let's fight them. Some said, let's pray. Some said, let's jump into the sea. All kinds of different ideas. And these ideas were logical under the circumstances. Because what are you going to do? There's a sea over here, there's a sea over there. What are you going to do? There's nothing you can do but, a response, so to speak, on the moment. Go back to Mitzrayim, give up, so forth. What they did not recognize, is this principle. That yes, indeed, they are sandwiched over here between the sea and the Mitzrayim. And naturally speaking, nothing, they cannot see a way out. But who brought them into this situation? And for what purpose? Hashem brought them into this situation. And the purpose of bringing them into this situation is to reveal and to affect an occurrence that they could not possibly predict. Something
What revealed what he was?
reveal
Revealed what?
an occurrence, happening, something that is not part of the natural world. So they could not possibly predict it. What actually happened? You know what happened, right? The sea split, and they were able to walk through the sea. That incident, even though this is once in history that the sea split, but in truth, the essence of this is occurring all the time. What is the essence of it? The essence is this, that a Yid finds himself in Golus. A Yid finds himself in a very difficult, trying moment. He is fighting with his own Yitzhak, fighting with his own Nefesh HaBamis, fighting with the world. He has all kinds of different confrontations. And he thinks that there is only, one alternative: either give up or jump into the sea. But he doesn't realize that, in fact, there are hidden forces, hidden power in the truth of the Gashmis itself. Because, as you said before, the Gashmis, the world itself, the Gashmis itself, even though you don't see it, is really a godly creation. And it really represents a godly force. And ultimately, that itself becomes his assistant in bringing godliness out. Just like the sea split and became a source of revealing godliness. This is what Ephraim represent. Ephraim, the name Ephraim is said is Hifrani Elikim Be'eretz Oni. That even though I am in this land of affliction, in Mitzrayim, where do I have my success? In Mitzrayim. In other words, this is a message, so to speak. This is a principle that there is everything really represents a godly quality. There are those things that are identifiable, readily identifiable, like with Nefesh Olekis, that this is something you see and you feel it. And those things where it is hidden. And this hidden force becomes revealed as a result of avodah, as a result of hard work, as a result of the experience of the goals. So that this explains both what is accomplished to the goals, because when Eden, the original goals, the Golus Mitzrayim, Eden went through the Golus Mitzrayim, and the Golus Mitzrayim, as we will learn, was really a total Golus, a very dark and very destructive Golus. But what did it bring about? What was the result of the Golus? The result of the Golus that there came out a nation that was ready to receive the Torah. Directly from Hashem. And we'll get to there and we'll speak what that means. In other words, this was something greater than even that which the Seichel can appreciate, which the Nefesh Olekis can appreciate. There has to be something that permeated and broke to the very physical world itself. And this is what made it possible for the Torah to be given. This is true, as I said before, this is true throughout all the years of Golus, of trials that Eden go through. And this is also very true, this is important to understand, this is the truth of our own challenges. many times, someone like anyone here in yeshiva has good days, good weeks, feels he's accomplishing, he's elated, he really relates to his learning and everything flows and he feels the learning, he feels good. He gets up in the morning, he's anxious to get up and anxious to go and learn. Something clicks, something fits with him. And then as he goes through a period of time, he begins to cool off. And somehow he is losing that enthusiasm. And he would wish that he would have today what he had yesterday, but he can't restore it. The day after becomes even worse. And then he loses it completely. He says, I lost interest. I lost interest. This is something which I heard many times from different students. And this is true, students, and it's true by every person who goes this up and down. What is the significance of this? What is actually happening? Just like in the case of Eden, when Eden left Mitzrayim, you use that analogy, I'll continue on that. Eden left Mitzrayim. Left Mitzrayim was all miraculous, right? Mitzrayim got their plagues, and they came out of Mitzrayim with the cloud covering them, and the pillar of fire, with all miraculous thing. And finally, they came facing the Yam, and the Mitzrayim chasing them, and they were totally lost. What's going to be now? In other words, as a person progresses in his own growth, like you're learning, you come to a certain point, and then you have to cross a sea. You have to go to the next step. When you have to go to the next step, you're faced with a blockage. It's not a straight thing. You have to have the sea split for you, and you don't see how it's going to happen. It's completely blocked. I don't understand anything. I have no spirit. The reason for that is that a person the normal growth pattern of a person is you have a certain state, a certain growth, until you reach a point where you have to go to the next step. It's a step over, and the next step is completely dark. You don't see anything there. This is like the experience of Golus. What is the experience of Golus? When you're in Eretz Yisrael, just to give an analogy, in Eretz Yisrael, you see everybody around me believes in me, he's studying and learning and so forth, everything is holy and fine. And I come to the conclusion the whole world belongs to Hashem. Whenever I turn, I see the Medrash. Then I have to take a trip to Mitzrayim, and this whole holiness disappears. Everybody here has completely different thoughts. Nobody runs to shul. Nobody's interested in learning. Is this a different world? But did I make a mistake? You understand? In other words, there's circumstance. There's a certain moment when things appear so clear, but they are clear because of a certain circumstance. But we have to then translate this clarity to a place where it's not so obvious, which is called Golus. And what is the purpose and the value of translating it into this Golus? facing in the Golus is that by going through that difficulty, you're revealing a new perspective. Just like when Eden came out of Mitzrayim and they came to Yamsuf, and what happened? The Yamsuf split. This is something totally new. It's not part of the normal path, normal travel. The same thing occurs in a person's growth pattern. One, there's a certain distance of period, and he learns and he davens and everything is fine. But this is all on the Ruchnistic level. Then he becomes confronted. Then he becomes confronted with a different challenge, and there he loses that sense, that Ruchnistic sense. Let's take a very simple example right here in our own experience. A very simple thing, right? We're all sitting here, everybody is bent, bent is intent on the same thing, you want to learn, daven, be friends and all that. And then someone becomes impatient and he screams at you. Get out of here, you're in my way. What does that mean? So that throws you off. Am I in a friendly place or am I in enemy territory?
Usually enemy.
What?
Usually enemy.
Usually enemy. It is our duty. This is what the whole challenge is about, is to break through and to show that godliness, which is the friendly territory, extends everywhere. This is what the whole challenge of life is about. There could be small challenges, there could be big challenges. But every challenge is a moment where you step over and you reveal a new perspective, a new insight, just like comparable to Kriyas Yamsuf, something that you never expected can happen. This growth path is purposefully, is intentionally created by the Eibishter, to the extent that the Eibishter goes and takes his nation, puts it in Golus, and makes sure it's 100% Golus, in order that we reveal in this Golus something that is hidden and is contained therein, that is greater than anything that we had before. The truth is, again, we will talk about it later, the truth is, the absolute truth is, that when Eden received the Torah, they became greater, they had more godly power than Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. Even though in terms of who they were, the madrege of the people, there's no comparison, but they had a completely different power, different strength. Something that didn't exist before. So that this explains what this difference in Ephraim and Menashe. Menashe is like that which maintains a perspective, and you remember who you are, and you keep on keep on doing, even though you're in Golus, you keep on doing Teiro mitzvahs and so forth. But Ephraim, this is where you actually get involved in the Golus elements, in the Gashmias, and you're confronting all kinds of difficulties, and you are transforming them and bringing that into Kedush. As far as we are concerned over here, what I wanted to say is this. Each one of us here has a background. You have all kinds of different exposures from before. Some went to school, some had all kinds of different experiences and all that. The first thing, of course, is to come in and to learn and to gain an understanding and knowledge of Torah. And to put all the challenges, all the experiences that we had before aside, and to try to understand and get this perspective, get this knowledge of Torah. But then, ultimately, all these experiences that we had before coming to yeshiva, they were not in vain. We are supposed to ultimately utilize all that we have, all that we know in Torah, in Yiddishkeit. This is when we are, so to speak, reaching the point where we are fully accomplishing our mission. When we take that which was outside of Torah, experiences that knowledge and so forth, exposures that had nothing to do with Torah, and show how that is really is supportive and has a value in Torah. There was one time a group of students from a college of professors that came to 770, and they sat by the Farbrengen. They sat by the Farbrengen. This was the early years when we first started breaking through, so to speak, going to the colleges and so forth. And the Rebbe spoke that Shabbos, and he said that it is definitely much purer and more pleasant if somebody has no conflicts, has no exposure, he's goes straight from the cradle to the yeshiva, and from the yeshiva into Avodas HaKodesh, he has no problems. But if someone got involved, then he has to ultimately, especially when it comes to studies and education, one has to then seek to find within that knowledge, within that exposure, how that actually strengthens and supports Torah, supports Yiddishkeit. This is the real element of transformation. Transformation means that you take that which is outside of Torah, the worldly exposure, and you show how Torah really, how this is actually supportive of Torah itself. The Rebbe in Tanya, the Rebbe in Tanya says that the Rambam, in the Ramban, you may have come across, you'll come across later soon, that they studied Chochmas Chitzonis, it's called Chochmas Chitzonis, or worldly Chochmas, because they knew how to use it to strengthen Torah. So that, in truth, there is nothing in the world that cannot be utilized for Torah. But you have to know how to do it. But someone who has been exposed, in order for a person who has been exposed to another world, in order for a person to come into Torah and to feel totally one with it, to feel without any conflict, one has to confront those things that he was exposed to and see how they too are fit and part of Yiddishkeit, part of Torah. This is the element where Efrani Elikim be'eretz oni. That even though there is Eretz Oni, this is the land of affliction, this is Golus, but this is where I get a greater strength, I draw strength in Yiddishkeit from that exposure, by transforming it. Just one quick, one statement, so to speak, that would explain what this is about. The Rebbe made it that a person is born a child, an infant, and then he grows from infancy into childhood, and childhood into adolescence, and adolescence into adulthood. Then there is a smooth transition, and he can identify himself. He can see how he got to where he is. And he has a certain stability, a certain strength. Someone who has a change of life, a change of venue, a midstream, a midlife, and he can't relate to anything from before, he is lacking a stability. He's lacking a solid base, because a person is not born at age 20. A person is born at infancy. Therefore, it is important for one to be able to relate back and to have a continuation, a continuity in one's life. I have dealt, with Baal Tshuva for many, many years, and I always say to Baal Tshuva, remember like this: some Baal Tshuva, they go through yeshiva many years and so forth, and they want to forget that they Baal Tshuva. I'm a lifer. I said to him, you're making a very big mistake. You may be a lifer in every respect. You feel comfortable, you know Yiddishkeit and Talazach. But you have to have infancy as well. Childhood. You can't be born as an adult. And therefore, by remembering how you got into Yiddishkeit, how you came to do tshuva, is something which helps you along and gives you a complete sense of stability. The Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, Sheva Yipil Tzadik Hukom, that a tzaddik falls 7 times and rises up again. You may have learned it already. The Alter Rebbe explains, what is this about? Chanoich lanar al pi darkoi. That you should train a child al pi darka, according to his way. The Alter Rebbe says, I'm going very, very briefly, because the time is up, very quickly. Even a tzaddik Even a full-fledged tzaddik, an adult who has gone through all the learning and all the insight and all the understanding, will also have a moment when he falls down. Falls and rises. So the Alter Rebbe says, what happens during the fall? What keeps him up when he is down? What keeps him going? You'd be surprised what the Alter Rebbe says. What keeps him up? Huh?
Education from his youth.
His childhood. His childhood. And he says, that which his mother told him in the cradle, this is what keeps him up. So I was learning with Mali Tshuva. They said, okay, very nice. You know what I learned in the cradle? The 3 little pigs. So what's going to keep me up? Was sagst du?
Nif, naf, naf, and naf, nuf. Three names.
3 names, yeah. What's going to maintain? Where do I have my base? Where do I have my strength? So I explained to them exactly this thing. What is so special about this which his mother taught him? I mean, if he is a tzaddik, he's a Baal Talmud Chacham, he has learned so much. So why he can lose that, but he can't lose that which his mother taught him? What's the difference? So this is what I explained. That a person learns and learns and learns. Yes, he goes, and he can lose the spirit of it. And then because he has to come to the next stage. But this which he learned as a youth from his mother, he was a child, and at that time he learned it with his whole heart, with his whole person. That he cannot forget. Because that completely imbued itself into his very bones. His whole mitzias, his whole presence, is accepted that. That's a primary truth. He can't lose that. Where is our youth, a Bali Tshuva? Something that we cannot lose. That is the moment when we made a decision to become a Baal Tshuva. The moment when one changes his perspective, in other words, he crosses the sea, makes a decision to change his whole venue. At that moment, he has such a clear view as to what he is leaving behind and where he is going. This clarity one must not lose. This is why it is important to recognize. If I say I'm a lifer, that means I never had this transition. And then I don't have this base on which to rely. I'm not a lifer. I'm a Baal Tshuva. And when was I born? At the moment when I made that decision. And that decision that I made, this is something which is strong and can carry me through to any moment, to any difficulty. So, oh boy, I obviously, I'm sorry. Okay. So the Rebbe will give us all strength to carry through in the goals and all the difficulties and each one of us should successfully cross his own Yam Suf.
Amen.